I just wanted to say welcome to folks as they're joining. We're excited for today's webinar. And we will get started right at 2. Okay, it's 2 o'clock. So I wanted to start on time and just want to welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on fostering a culture of belonging. My name is Penny MacCormack, and I am the Chief Academic Officer for the Association of College and University Educators, ACUE for short. And it is my absolute pleasure to moderate today's webinar focused on our newest offering titled Fostering a Culture of Belonging. Just to go over our agenda a bit, if you could go to the next slide. During today's webinar, you'll first hear from Marlo Goldstein Hode, an expert, an author, and a close colleague of ours. She is an expert and author in diversity, equity, inclusion. She is the Senior Manager of Strategic Diversity Initiatives in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and the Staff Ombuds at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. Marlo will start us off by sharing some of the compelling research on the importance of belonging in connection to the ability to succeed as both a college student and in the various roles across our campuses. Then you will hear from, if you go to slide 4, then you will hear from 4 very dynamic individuals, including Adannaa Alexander, a clinical assistant professor at Sam Houston State University, Evelyn Espinoza, the Director of Student Success and Advising at Cal State LA, Dr. Tony Johnson, Dean of Academic Services at North Central State College, and finally, Ali Shah, Director of Emergency Management at San Jacinto College. Each of our panelists will share one or more of the practices they use in their role to foster a culture of belonging. You know, we have included individuals with different roles on campus so that it's crystal clear that every role, in fact, every interaction on campus, whether it be a student talking to their advisor, a department meeting where colleagues are sharing their thoughts and ideas, or even a family member coming to campus to see if the campus is accessible for their son, every interaction matters. And it is those interactions, sometimes very short, that we use to determine if we feel we belong. Now, I think some folks might think, oh, this is kind of one of those warm and fuzzy topics. But I think if any of us thinks about it, we can admit that when we don't have that feeling of belonging, it becomes more challenging to do simple things like ask questions or share our ideas and thoughts, the very things that we need to learn, and the very reason we're here today. Go to the next slide, just a few housekeeping reminders. Please feel free to use the Q&A function to ask questions of our panelists, and we'll use the chat to share resources during today's presentation. Marlo, can you start us off?
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everybody. And I'm happy to start us off. I will say, however, I'm not going to share compelling research. I'm going to share a compelling metaphor. And the metaphor, it comes from this idea of DEIB, and you probably know what that is by now, but let me just give a little background. When I first started working in this field over a decade ago, our office was called the Diversity Office. And, a couple years later, we realized, diversity isn't quite enough. So we added on some other concepts and letters, and we became the DEI office. Now, you will also start seeing around, if you're paying attention, there's offices like mine that are called the DEIB, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, because this compelling research that Penny mentioned, there's a large body that is really demonstrating how critical it is, both to student success as well as the success of faculty and staff, to have a sense of belonging on campus. You'll also start seeing DEIBA, and that A is both referring to accessibility as well as anti-racism. So as our field develops, you'll see our acronyms develop as well. But I wanted to share a metaphor that will really show how this all fits together, and I hope illustrate it in a compelling way that will make it easy both for you to take in and to share with others. So when we're talking about diversity, in the context of my metaphor of a dinner party, we're talking about inviting a bunch of different people to the party. And of course, this makes for a great party, much more interesting, better party. But what happens when they get there? So equity is when everybody has a seat at the table that works for them. That means we have space at the table where a wheelchair might be able to pull in. That means we have space at the table for lefties to not have to have their elbows clash with the righties. That means we have larger seats for our colleagues of size who need to have a comfortable seat. That means that we have booster chairs for our friends who are bringing their kids to the party, right? So everybody has a seat at the table that works for them. That's equity. Inclusion is when everyone has a voice in the menu and the food that's being served. So there's no obstacles created to them enjoying the food. We are taking into account preferences, dietary preferences, restrictions, allergies, but not only removing the obstacles, we're asking people for their input into the menu, because that will lead to having a rich, fantastic, nutritious meal that we're all going to enjoy and benefit from. And so then belonging is the feeling that you get when you're sitting at this table, sharing and passing food, enjoying conversation, enjoying laughter. You're looking around, you're seeing people who look like you and people who don't look like you, but you're still breaking bread together, and you know that you belong at that table. And then after dinner, right, and you're all full, and you know that you can either just go lie down on the couch, or you can go to the kitchen and help with the dishes because you're at home, you're a contributor to this place that everyone belongs. Now, this may conjure an image for some of you of the Thanksgiving holiday, which we just enjoyed, some of us, with our families, and we know that those can sometimes be tricky. So I'd like to continue the metaphor a little bit and think about this Thanksgiving dinner with our family, and we've brought our new Latinx queer girlfriend to the family dinner with us, and we're having a good time. And then, of course, Uncle Bob says some racist, sexist, homophobic comment, or maybe it came from grandma, and no one says anything. And so now our guest is sitting there, has stopped participating in the conversation, is counting the minutes until they can leave, and I guarantee will never come back again. Okay, so I want to now take this metaphor and bring it to the campus environment. So it's essential to have efforts at recruiting students from diverse backgrounds. And of course, we must put in the structures for equity to have the support that they need to success. And we all have to be intentional about inclusion, but it takes an entire family, the faculty, staff, and students, to foster the sense of belonging, to make our campuses places where students can get a belly full of knowledge, and our faculty and staff want to stay part of the family, because we know that our faculty and staff are the backbone of our institutions. So I really want to thank you for being here and being willing to learn more and to take action to do what you can do to make your own campuses a family where people want to belong. And that's my metaphor.
Powerful metaphor, Marlo. Thank you so much. I love when you bring your creativity. We so appreciate it. So before we go to our panelists, just a few words about this new offering, which is unique for ACUE, in that we're supporting campus roles beyond instructors, because as I shared earlier, our students and our colleagues utilize all of the interactions, both on campus and online, to determine if they feel they belong. In addition to featuring varied campus roles from over 25 institutions, we're including expert panels, self-reflection exercises in this new offering to ensure that we are able to effectively address topics like implicit bias, microaggressions, stereotype threat, imposter phenomenon, and the creation of an inclusive environment. The practices that you'll hear from our panelists and the many more in our courses are often practical, at times simple. Things as simple as taking the time to learn how to pronounce someone's name, or making sure that course and campus materials represent the rich diversity of students and staff on our campus. At ACUE, it has always been imperative that our course takers not only learn about, and in this case, the complexity of DEI-B concepts, thank you, Marlo, but also learn what they can do in their individual roles, in this case, to foster a culture of belonging. I want us all, as we engage in this discussion, to imagine if everyone across our institutions felt valued and felt they belong. Imagine the diverse thoughts and ideas that would be shared, the thoughtful questions that would be posed, and the academic and professional goals that would be reached. Today's presentation by our panelists will help you see that it is not one office or one individual that creates a culture of belonging. It is everyone making the effort to learn and use the practices shown to ensure every individual on our campuses feels heard, seen, and valued. It does, in fact, take a village. Enough from me. Let's hear from our esteemed panelists. We're going to start with Ali Shah. Ali.
Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I wanted to start off by making a holistic statement, and that is to let everyone present today and who might be listening know that creating this environment of belonging, of inclusivity, it's not just an exercise that needs to be done in the classroom. It's an exercise that needs to be done throughout our campus. That environment needs to be fostered and created in the whole community. That's how we'll be successful. That's how we'll make our students feel safe and our students feel like they belong and ultimately successful in their academic endeavors. So I'm going to touch briefly on some of the practices, but before we even do that, you have to live it. You have to believe it and live it. Your team and your community, your constituents, your students, they will know the difference between a practice that's occurring because it's required versus a practice that's occurring because you truly believe in it and you exemplify it. So it starts with you. It starts internally. You have to recognize your own implicit biases. You have to recognize the mechanisms that you are going to use to overcome those biases and how you're going to lead from a place of equity and inclusivity. So once you have that belief built in yourself, then you have to expand that out. So in the non-academic environment, in the non-classroom environment, I'll focus a bit on the public safety and the support services side. You've got to start reviewing your calls for more than just the objective metrics. We're all used to reviewing time, the time it takes for us to resolve a call or how quickly we responded to an incident. But you have to expand that and start looking at those and reviewing those calls for service from an equity standpoint. Was the interaction did the interaction take place in a manner that felt that allowed the student to feel like they had a voice, they were able to express themselves freely, and you take that and then you incorporate the lessons you learn from those reviews into your training. You start including those DEI or DEI-BA objectives into your day-to-day training activities. And then you don't limit it to just that environment within your internal group. You start bringing in those diverse stakeholders, and you have to make them feel comfortable enough to share their feedback. You can't just sit those folks in the back of the room and say, we did it. We brought in those people. You actually have to allow them to voice their concerns, even if those concerns seem like they are contrary to what you're trying to accomplish. You still have to give them that voice. You still have to consider what they have to say. And then you have to look inwards and figure out if there's a change that can be made in your operating process, your operating procedure. And once you have that environment built internally, you can turn that around. You can now make that forward facing. Yourself and your team needs to start engaging with those stakeholders, not just as part of your routine response, but also outside of that. And the one thing I'd like to highlight here is that you don't know, just by walking around your campus, what the lived experience of a student might have been, where their safe spaces are, or where they feel comfortable to speak up and ask questions. So you may think as a police officer that your job is only to maintain the safety and security of that campus. But you may have a student who comes from a family of law enforcement officers. So that student is going to feel a lot more comfortable talking to you as a law enforcement officer about what their issues are and what they need help with than they would be with anyone else on campus. So don't discount that lived experience of the student. You can't tell that just by looking at that student. But also on the flip side of that, it's an opportunity to reset the stereotypes. You, again, don't know the lived experiences of those who are in that community. So they may have had a negative experience with someone, and that is what is framing their implicit bias. So you interacting and your team interacting with the stakeholders within those calls for service and outside those calls of service, just routine interactions, you have an opportunity to reset that stereotype, reframe that student's experience and their idea of what the experience at college or their even experience outside of college with those different professionals would be. And that can have a long-lasting effect on that student. You can change the trajectory of a student's academic and life experience by a simple positive interaction. And that, to me, is a very, very powerful tool that we have. And I want to end by saying that it's not just something that is an added on responsibility. It's not an other duty as assigned. Creating this environment of belonging, that is truly what we are there for. That is our job, and we should take that very seriously, and we should do it enthusiastically.
Ali, thank you. That was powerful, and I loved how you reminded us of the importance of authenticity, right, in our actions, that it's coming from our heart. Thank you so much. Next, we'll hear from Adannaa Alexander. Adannaa?
Thank you. I'm excited to be part of this conversation. So from a Pew Research Center article published in 2019, we know that college faculty have become more ethnically and racially diverse, but it still remains far less than our student population. And I know that to be true at my own institution and not just on ethnicity or race. About 50% of our student population is first generation, and we have nearly 600 students who are veterans. So we know that there are challenges recruiting and retaining diverse faculty and instructors. And as our institutions work on that, there are strategies that we can do now to introduce our students to diverse perspectives within our fields. So today I wanted to share with you at least 2 strategies that I use in one of my courses that help ensure that course materials include diverse perspectives, because including diverse perspectives shows that we value differences and which encourages a sense of belonging. So the first one, before I get into that specifically, I teach public health related courses, both in person and online. And for one of my courses, the goal is to help students become more culturally competent future public health and healthcare professionals. And we go through 6 cultural groups. 5 of them are based on ethnicity, and 1 is based on non-ethnic culture. So for example, for the past few semesters, I focused on people with disabilities. So the first strategy that I've highlighted or that I want to highlight is that we can include diverse perspectives by inviting guest speakers from within our field. And so in my case, these guest speakers are from the various cultural groups that we talk about and also have done work in health promotion with those specific cultural groups. So for example, I have a colleague who I did the Peace Corps with who is ethnically Cambodian. Her parents migrated to the United States as refugees and she was born and raised here. So she works at a county healthcare agency in California and has done some work in health promotion among Asian populations. Therefore, she can speak both personally and professionally about that specific culture. And just on a slight side note, right, I bring my guest speaker is from California, right? And I and my students are in Texas. So we Zoom her into the classroom. And this also exposes students to professionals across the United States. And then I record those Zoom sessions, which I can then use that content in my online sections of the course. I also don't want to forget about our on-campus colleagues and resources that we can tap into. So for example, one of the cultural groups we focus on is Arab Americans and Arab culture. And we have an Arabic and Middle Eastern program. So I invite an associate professor who teaches Arabic language and culture to talk to my students. The second strategy is similar to the first, and I use parts of recorded webinars that have a panel of people. Again, for this course, the people are from a specific cultural group talking about health issues. And as a class, we watch small portions of those webinars and then have small group discussions. And in this case, I like it that we can hear from a few more perspectives in one video. So for example, from my alma mater, Washington University in St. Louis through the Brown School, they have an open classroom series. And in 2020, they showed several webinars about COVID-19 and race. And one that I showed is called Native Communities in COVID, Reflections of the Past and Outlooks for the Future. And I mentioned this one because this is a cultural group that many of my students are less exposed to. In addition to exposing students to diverse perspectives, I think it's important that the students see themselves in the professionals that they aspire to be. And I think it's just as important that students see others who are not part of their cultural group succeeding as professionals in the field. So this means a lot to students. And I say that because of what students have said. So for example, I invited a former colleague and mentor of mine. She's a Black woman who has done extensive research in health promotion in Black communities. And after her presentation, I asked the students to come up with a question that they could ask the speaker. And one of my Black female students said this: I didn't have a question, but I was really into the speaker. She was great and real, which I relate to more. And it really helped me to get a little more info on my background other than slavery talk. And it really means a lot to see a professor so into today's values of how Black women and men are being treated. Thank you for bringing her on. Again, there are ways that we can incorporate diverse people and perspectives now to help build a community of respect and belonging to our students.
Adannaa, thanks so much for those comments. It makes me think about, when you do bring those diverse perspectives, ideas, thoughts, you actually have a better discussion, right? And you learn more than had we been like just focused. So I love that reminder, and there is nothing better than a student's thoughts. So thank you for sharing the words from one of your students. Really enjoyed that. Evelyn Espinoza will share her thoughts and practices next. Evelyn.
Thank you, Penny. I'm happy to be here today to share tips for demystifying a campus language. And before I dive in, I want to share a quick story about myself. I'm a first-generation Latinx college student, and in my very first semester of college, I shoved my syllabus into my backpack on the first day of class, not realizing its value. And of course, by week 2, I was scrambling to find it in my bag because I realized that sheet of paper had everything I needed to know to pass the class. And in retrospect, I understand that that moment uncovered a gap in my knowledge about college. And if I had had an ally or someone in my network explain the importance of the syllabus, perhaps I wouldn't have had to learn such a hard lesson and missed my very first and only assignment in college because I didn't let it happen again. And so, I mean, don't feel so bad for me. Everything worked out. I'm happy to report I graduated, but I think about this situation when working with our incoming students and really with all students throughout their academic journey. I know as higher education professionals, we know the ins and outs of the college language, and we can demystify the campus vernacular for students by creating strong ties, clearly defining resources, and providing scaffolded support before and after they arrive on campus. So next slide, please. So without further ado, here are my recommendations for helping demystify campus language. So number one is establish your allyship. Let students know who you are and your vested interest in them, and explain your role and the length of time you will be around to assist them. Is this a seasonal relationship with the student? Is this going to be a 2-year, 4-year? And this way they know how long you're going to be around and how long they can depend on you to seek help. And also make it a point to learn about your students. Knowing a few facts shows your interest in their success and can help establish the relationship as a partnership rather than a top-down, where you're interested in learning about them. And that makes them more acceptable to feeling comfortable to speaking with you. Number two is share and discuss resources. Share what you know, and when sharing resources, use the service's full name, then acronyms, and provide brief descriptions. If you're talking to a student about a resource center, for example, explain if the assistance is offered on or off campus, if it's part of campus fees, if it's seasonal, or if additional applications are required. And remain assumption-free about what a student might know or not know. Universities have implemented many fantastic resources in recent years that all students can benefit from learning about, whether they're first generation or not. Next is provide timely reminders. So frequency can help reinforce campus language. As university professionals, you may know the peak periods in the academic calendar and critical deadlines. So you can give student reminder messages about action steps and let them know when it may be a good time to utilize the service. So for example, sending a quick message about extended library hours during finals week could be very helpful to a student. I find in my center that it's very helpful for us to create a messaging calendar so that it keeps us on track on when we should be sending helpful resources to our students. And lastly, whenever possible, involve campus supporters. Share information with supporters, talk about resources with community networks, about recruitment days, ask campus partners if there's room to participate in presentations that they're hosting, or leverage social media to share events. I especially like attending events with our community partners where I know parents of students will be present. It's an excellent opportunity to discuss college expectations and timelines without delving too much into the specifics about academics or violating any FERPA laws. And providing families with knowledge about campus language can help students have conversations about campus life with familiar people, helping to normalize it outside of school. I always think about how cool, or I like to think of how cool it would be for someone in a student's outside network to ask a student, how was your first day of school? And did you get your syllabus? And where did you put it away? Thank you.
I love that. Where's that syllabus? Remind them right away, right? You know, I'm a first gen college student too, and I love how you mentioned the language, because I do remember someone indicating I should go to the bursar's office and feeling like clueless, like no idea where that might be. So great reminder. Thanks so much, Evelyn. Dr. Toni Johnson will share some of her thoughts and practices.
Hello, everybody. I am very glad to be here with you as well. In my particular role at my institution, I am responsible for faculty professional development. And so one of the practices that I want to talk about today is incorporating diverse perspectives and experiences in the particular courses. As a routine practice, almost every faculty member, as they're prepping for their class at the beginning of whatever session or semester that they're working with, they're going through their course materials, they're checking on the reading materials. They're looking to see if there's anything new in their particular field that helps with that. And one of the things that we've been doing a lot in our coaching sessions with faculty is talking about, how diverse related are your course materials, are your reading materials? Have you thought about how it speaks to the various different constituencies that may be a part of your student body? And so we've been doing a lot of work with that, helping to bring in those extra additional voices, similar to what you've heard some of the other speakers say earlier. But one of the challenges that I've had and had pretty good success with is you will always have someone who will say, there's nothing diverse about my particular course or my particular discipline. It's all either all A or all B, and there's no variant to it. And so what I've done and encouraged those particular faculty members to do is to have an open collaborative conversation with their students through the course of the course, whether it's in a discussion or some type of group activity, and to listen to the students' voice and see where the students could come up with additional ideas or thoughts or perspectives of how diverse perspectives can be in there. And I've had some good response from some faculty who have come back and said, I learned about A, B, and C from my students, a particular perspective that I hadn't given thought of, and they gave them some additional points to go on for research and additional conversation. One of the things that we found in doing that is by helping to open the student's voice into their learning, into the curriculum, the student now begins to get more confidence that they're able to build that relationship better with their faculty, other members in the college community, but it also strengthens their interpersonal confidence levels that, they can go out, they can find out information, they can learn things, which makes them a stronger student and a stronger person in our community. One of the things that we talk a lot about in our institution is our students typically come to us because they want to be better. They want to be, they either want to change their lives, they want to change their career, advance themselves in some kind of way. And one of our roles that we do here, we're a community college. And so we feel like it's our responsibility to really help those students to become better by providing this rich, comfortable environment where they can come and learn, they can come and make mistakes, they can come and figure out the right and wrong ways to do things, but it's a safe environment and they can learn and they can grow, and then they can go back out into the community to be great community citizens, for our community. So that's kind of some of the things that we do here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I love that you mentioned that we learn from mistakes, always good to remind us, but also, as we engage with students who are coming to us to be better, to your point, right? Always remembering that, because sometimes, we can get frustrated or what have you, but that student has set a goal for him or herself, and they're intending and their efforts are really focused on that. And I think it's so important for us to always remember that when we're engaging and chatting with them. So thanks for reminding us of that. We are open for the Q&A portion of today's webinar, and I am excited to have our panelists engage with some of your questions. Let's see what we have here. So I see a question: what definition of belonging are you using for your research? How do you distinguish between belonging and welcome? How do you deal with spaces that are meant to be exclusive by design? Religious spaces, cultural centers, professional associations. While I may or may not be welcome into the space, it's not a place by design I belong. So definition of belonging. Anybody want to share that? Their thoughts on that?
I'm somehow unmuted and I apologize, but I can go ahead and pipe in real quick. Besides my metaphor for visualizing belonging, I think there's two critical elements. One is a sense of being valued and needed in an environment, right? So not just like, oh, you're welcome that you're here, but you're a critical part of the learning or whatever activity is happening. And then the other part of it is this sense that your characteristics, your identity, who you are, aligns with or complements the environment or system. So it's not a sense of belonging that everyone has to be like you and like, you know, but there has to be a sense that we kind of jive and there's a reason for me to be here. And that adds to the environment and my sense that I belong here.
Well said. Anyone else want to add?
I'd like to chime in a little bit. I think the difference between belonging and being welcomed is about relationship. I have been in a lot of situations where I was welcome. People were nice to me. They spoke to me. They smiled at me. But I didn't really feel like I belonged because I didn't have a relationship. I didn't feel like I was comfortable enough to say anything, ask a question, participate in a certain way, because I didn't have relationship with those people. And so one of the things that we are kind of touting more for belonging is building the relationship with our students, building the relationship among our faculty and staff, that it's not that we're just being nice and smiling and saying, hey, how you doing? But it's that I know you. I feel comfortable with you. I've had conversations with you and I can ask you a question.
Beautiful. I'm with you. Feeling known, right? Seen and heard. I hear students use those words all of the time when essentially they're telling us they belong, right? I felt heard. Really, really key. Anyone else want to add before we go to another question? Adannaa.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in too about also creating that sense of belonging among students themselves. So as an instructor inside your classroom, whether that's online or in person, helping students connect with each other. So for example, in person, when you have small groups, you might mix up the students more than once. Don't let them just pick their groups, but be conscious of like, let's mix it up. Let's get to know everyone. And, you know, sort of saying, you know, even though and challenging students, if you talk a lot, recognize that and try and welcome your other colleagues. And if you're quiet, I challenge you to speak up a little bit more because your voice is also valuable and we want to hear from you.
Yeah, and it makes me think of practices that we use, right, to help the quieter person, of which I would count myself, right? Being in those smaller groups really helps you get kind of used to opening up and sharing, and then you can go ahead and share with the whole group. Lovely. We have another question, so let me pose that. Any resources regarding a pool of diverse speakers who may be interested in sharing their insights to students or practitioners they may not know? Does anyone have any resources maybe that they've encountered that they might offer here?
I don't have a specific resource, but I have a strategy that I'd like to share. Because, for example, when I talked about bringing in guest speakers, a lot of those guest speakers were networks of mine. So reaching out to people that I know. So I'd encourage, if there's professional organizations or professional organizations that you might tap into, like when you go to conferences and you're meeting people and talking to people and networking with people. I also want to, in that regard, thinking about if your campus has an office of diversity, equity, inclusion of some sort, reaching out to them. They might know people, right, that they can, because the thing is too, when we think about, well, from my perspective as an instructor, I want people too who can speak to the content so I can relate it back to the content. And so I think that one strategy about networking with your professional organizations and there's resources on campus could be helpful.
Great strategy. Anyone else want to offer any thoughts?
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Adannaa said, I would also encourage y'all to focus locally. if you need a speaker, you're welcome to email me and I'll be happy to connect. But I may not be able to relate to students at Cal State the way I do with students who are in Texas. So think locally. That's going to allow your students to learn that people within their own community have that same mindset, have that same lived experience. So it'll be a lot more meaningful for them hearing that from a local person than it would be somebody who is outside of their immediate universe.
I totally agree. I know we have community partners that we work with, and they run these amazing like summer melt programs, right, to help students with those final application pieces to make sure that they transition all the way into campus. And while that's happening outside of our university, it's a great opportunity to participate and be seen, right, in the community. Here's the university that's in your backyard. We should be present at these community events, helping connect those ties and making sure that our students are not just celebrating the acceptance letter, but celebrating the graduation milestone as well.
Real important reminder, Evelyn. Thank you. We have another question. Meg Spencer's asking suggestions on ways for staff or faculty to become more culturally competent. Any suggestions there?
Well,
I would
I'll
say you've
just
taken the first step by being here.
Well, and that's exactly it. It's a first step. It's not a destination. It's a journey. So if you are planning to go on this path, you need to plan out probably for a year, to be honest, to really like get folks along, realizing that people are in all different places on the journey. They're going to be coming together, having a variety of learning modalities. I hear there's a great course offered by ACUE, which is an online learning opportunity that faculty and staff can take together. And then they did a course on our campus, and they have learning circles built around that course. So the learning continues even after, but it's really not a one-shot deal, and you have to really invest a lot of time and thought into making meaningful and ongoing opportunities for your community.
I'd like to add too, like, as we're talking about thinking locally, again, if your institution has a diversity, equity, inclusion sort of committee or getting involved in that. But then I also thought about, oftentimes on campus, student groups might be having some kind of event, and it would be great to even just go out and see what's going on and learn from what our students are doing and how they're like showcasing the things that they're involved in.
I got that message. You were muted. Thank you, Adannaa. Really good point. Another question. With all that is being done for students while on campus, what are higher education institutions doing to continue that support for graduates as they enter the reality of the world of work, where no one is prepared to be as kind or sensitive? Any thoughts on that?
I can begin on that one. So a couple of things there. One, from a data perspective, there's 4 million graduates a year in the US. So even if we focus on those students, you're changing that workforce 4 million people at a time. So it doesn't take long to where the workforce does start to care, and they do give this idea of DEI the due importance that it deserves. But not only that, if you yourself are practicing that, then you're changing your workplace, and that influence grows, and it grows not just within your own organization, but it grows within your network, and this idea, it is infectious. It's very easy to show by your example to others that it doesn't take a lot of effort to be nice. And it's easy to replicate that. And I can tell you from experience that it catches on very quickly. So we do a little bit at a time, and it will change the workforce, and our students will carry that forward.
I really couldn't agree more. I'm so sorry to interrupt, Adannah, and we'll go right to you, but I really could not agree more that the work that we're doing on our campuses will and does change that work environment. Adannah, I'm so sorry I interrupted.
You're fine. No, I wanted to share that, one of the things I share with one of my classes, because I make them do a lot of teamwork, is what the top skill that employers are looking for undergraduate students is the ability to work in teams. And when we're talking about teams, we're talking about people and diverse people and people coming from different perspectives. So I think that this work directly impacts people's ability to effectively work in teams.
I love that you brought up teams because, one of the things our courses address is simply putting students in teams doesn't necessarily help them learn how to work productively in a diverse team. So we teach tools and strategies for helping students learn how to work productively in that diverse environment and be ready, much more ready for the workforce that absolutely is demanding the ability to do that. Anyone else want to respond? Okay. Short question. Asking about tools or surveys pertaining specifically to belonging. Does anyone have anything to share on that?
I can share a resource that I like to tap into. So one of my favorites is the disarm phase of the appreciative advising model. So for any, it's an advising model, but I think that it's a great phase in the model where if you're not sure where to get started on how to disarm a student and make them feel welcomed and included, it's a great phase to just tap into and look at. It focuses on that first impression and creating the space. And what does that space look like? I know I have a virtual background right now, but behind me, I have a whole wall full of graduates, for example, in graduation pictures. So when my students come into my office, they're like, okay, she's helped a couple people along the way. Maybe she can help me. But they start to visualize themselves as someone who can potentially be on my board one day, right? Another thing that I think a resource that might be helpful to folks depending on their positions on campus is I'm in a position where I have to send mass messages often, right? So I think about those mass messages and how I really want to make them intentional and where students can maybe feel like what I'm sending is actually helpful, right? I mentioned my timeline. So what I strive to do is create messages that have a sense of independence and interdependence. So if a student knows how to do something, they can take that message and run with it. And then the interdependence piece, I'm usually letting them know they can reach out to me if they need help. So an example would be during registration period, I'll say, hey, you register next week. Here's a short tutorial on building the right schedule for you. But if you need my help, of course, you can connect with me. I'm available and here are my hours. And so that way, that message sort of creates a sense of equity for almost all, where students can take the resource that I'm giving to them and use it independent of me if they don't need me. But I'm also letting them know that I'm here for them if they do.
Good reminder. I can say, I can't help myself but to say that the purpose of the courses that we've created, especially this course, right? Fostering a culture of belonging, is to exactly share the things you're asking for. Tools, surveys. I know that we've got examples of surveys in the course. I know one of the ways that you can better prepare to create that kind of culture of belonging is to start to know your students a little better. And so a simple set of survey questions you might ask in the beginning of a semester can serve that purpose. But indeed, there are many, many, many practices, tools, and strategies inside our offering. We have a question about online learning. This is a good one for us to tackle. Speak to some of the challenges facing online teaching and supporting diversity.
Well, I think one of the challenges that I have for online learning is helping students connect with each other, particularly with asynchronous courses, right, where you don't have to come together in a space at a specific time to get to know each other. So in one of my courses, it's a large online course, about 65 students, and I've used, it's technically a discussion board, but it's a more sophisticated tool. But it allows, it's kind of got a social media feel and helping students, you know, ask questions and respond to their peers. And I even break that down into smaller teams, right? So it doesn't feel like you're looking at 60 other ones, but you can look more at like 20 other students. So to try and create a little bit more of a community feel. And it's done on a weekly basis. So there is some interaction between students. So I've found that to be a little bit, to be helpful. And then, as I mentioned, I do have currently an online course where I make them do teamwork. It's challenging, but it's a smaller class, but I think that they do get a lot out of it in the end. So hopefully at the end of the semester, when I get my feedback, it'll be some positive comments, even though it's hard work.
I think there will be. You know, we've had the opportunity as part of our work, you know, to interview students, and they talk about how important the introductions, the ability to work in small groups are, so they don't feel, we know the number one complaint about online learning, I feel like I'm alone, right? We can help to answer that question, you know, that frustration with small groups, making sure they have that opportunity to talk to you, talk to their peers, etc. So really appreciate that. Anyone else want to add to that response? I know, Adannaa, this one's going to be interesting to you too, so please don't be shy. In response, here's the question. In response to our DEI-PD, I hear again and again from faculty that including diverse perspectives is only for the social sciences and humanities, but not STEM courses. Any ideas on how STEM can be more inclusive in their curriculum?
So I just have to share this one. I know of a colleague who's in math, and she did this upper level course, and they looked at math from different countries and how other people or other cultures may have counted, and it didn't necessarily look how we see it now. And so I thought that was so interesting that she was able to do that. And I would, in that regard, I might challenge us to think about, what is our discipline doing STEM in other countries, and we could compare and contrast some of how that's taught or practiced.
I would add to that as well. I mean, thinking about, you know, the examples that you give in class, right? The questions that are being asked, the scholars that you're bringing into the curriculum. There was one example I actually saw in an ACUE course, sorry, where the faculty put their syllabus on a web page and had the pictures of the scientists who were responsible for that particular article, and just having that representation integrated into the curriculum as a whole. It's so important that students can see themselves, because it contributes and help them understand that their perspective and experiences contributes to the discipline as a whole, to the development of knowledge, innovation, creativity, and make that just part of your ongoing message as STEM faculty.
Yeah, to add on to that, I think the importance that is given to research, and including topics of diversity within our research, there's a great lack of information when it comes to, let's pick on medicine for a second, how treatments differ based on gender, how dosing differs, how pain is evaluated across a diverse population. There's not a whole lot of research on that. So I think one of the steps we can take to address that is to start doing that research, and that's going to attract the students to that topic, and once you start giving it its due importance, the rest is going to follow, and it's going to create more opportunities and more understanding of why why it's important to address those diverse populations and allow for us to even on a distal land care for people better down the road.
Well put, Ali. Thanks, everybody.
Can I add one more thing on this topic?
Absolutely, Adannaa.
It's related to that, and then something I said earlier about tapping into your resources. So especially if you're in a discipline where you feel like, oh, there doesn't seem to be that much diversity. I don't know about other institutions, but here we have a subject librarian, and the subject librarian has been awesome in terms of finding content for me that's been updated and that had some diverse perspectives. And because she knows that I'm interested in those things, she's mindful about sending me things that come our way. So I'd like to shout out to our libraries, and our librarians can really help us curate sources or resources.
Thank you, Adannaa. Here's one. This participant's asking for ideas for dealing with students resistant to DEIB efforts. Any thoughts on that?
So something I like to do with students is have us like self-reflect on things. So for example, there's one assignment that I do where I have them take an implicit bias test. And then if people are familiar with Harvard and the project implicit, and then just have them reflect on, why did I get that score? Whether I agree with it or not, what are some of the things that may be impacting from my experience, my values, my beliefs that are giving me that score? And just allowing people to explore their own sort of biases. It's just funny because in the middle of people writing, they'll be like, oh, da, 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 da. But now that I think about it, X, Y, and Z, right? So I think when we have to sort of think about ourselves and we're not like trying to push them to think about others, it can be helpful.
I just piggyback off on that because I think the resistance comes when people think like, oh, it's not about me, it's about them. But if we take a very broad view of diversity, and oftentimes, race and gender are the first things that come to mind, but we're talking about disability, we're talking about gender identity, we're talking about sexual orientation, we're talking about so many things. We all have aspects of difference, some of which are privileged, some of which are marginalized, but this really is not about some people and other people. And frankly, like, diversity is not a choice, it's just the world we live in. And so if you want to be able to adapt and learn and be part of society, like, this is it, baby. Get on the train or stay behind. Sorry, I've been dealing with resistance for a long time. That's where I'm at with it now.
Yeah, I'd like to say if you reframe resistance to discomfort, it makes your response to it a lot different. Just you treat it as you would any other sensitive topic. That particular student doesn't have to participate. We don't know why they're resistant. It may be a perfectly legitimate reason why they're resistant. Likely not, but it's possible. So you let them sit it out. And if you create that environment of belonging and inclusivity in your class, eventually they'll see that this is what is the right path forward, and hopefully you'll be able to change their mind. Maybe not in your class, but in the next one, they'll be a little more reluctant to be that resistant or more comfortable to participate.
Ali, I think, you're making the point, this is a journey, right? So it may be that you just made some small impact on that journey for that student by recognizing their discomfort, giving them some options, but also still speaking your truth, right? Speaking authentically about your thoughts and feelings with regards to diversity, equity, inclusion. Here's another question. How important is a sense of shared purpose to promoting a sense of belonging?
It's a very heavy question and very few words. I would say it depends on how you're defining shared purpose. And that, again, that may not be the answer that you're looking for, but it's important to know what you mean by that shared purpose. If the shared purpose is we're all going to be good humans at the end, then it's absolutely important. It's the foundation of what we're trying to accomplish. So I think discovering what that shared purpose is and defining it is really, really important. And then it will really make that job that you have of creating that inclusive environment a lot easier if everyone has that same vision. So I'm not sure if I completely answered that question, but I think it's important to define what you mean by shared purpose, and then making sure that your flock, your class, your course, a cohort understands, and they all come on board with that.
Nice, Ali. I think, you've made a good point. We are just 1 minute to go. And so I just wanted to, first of all, thank all the panelists for being here, but also, does anyone have something to say, something to end with? And thank you, Ali, for putting up that slide. If you want to learn more about institutional partnerships with ACUE, you can see partnerships at acue.org. And then we do have open enrollment for individuals who would like to engage in this new offering. The open enrollment dates are there on the slide, and you will be able to get these slides when the webinar is over. 3 o'clock. So thank you, everyone. Thanks so much again to the panelists and for our audience. Thanks so much.